I just want to say thanks to everyone for joining us today. First off, I'd like to introduce Tim Salem, who is in his 10th year as principal of Scotts Ridge Middle School in Ridgefield, Connecticut. Prior to his current position, Tim served as an assistant principal and teacher at Danbury High School, and he was there for 16 years. As a classroom teacher, he taught classes centered on multiculturalism and human rights. Tim has been a past recipient of the Connecticut Association of Schools Assistant Principal of the Year Award, the Anne Frank USA Outstanding Educator of the Year Award, the Mahatma Gandhi Martin Luther King Jr. Peace Award, the Housatonic Valley Coalition's Community Asset Builder Award, and just recently, the Connecticut School Counselor Association Administrator of the Year. What a resume. So we're very fortunate today to have Tim joining us. Also from his school, or their school, is Kristin Kleis, who is in her 10th year as a Spanish teacher at Scotts Ridge Middle School and serves as the World Language Department Leader for SRMS. In her position, she has led the successful transition to proficiency-based instruction and guided her department through implementing new programs such as Ruler. As an active and enthusiastic member of the district, Kristin is a coach at the middle and high school level, a team mentor, and serves on a variety of district committees. In 2015, Kristin was awarded a grant through the Ridgefield Education Foundation to pilot a mindfulness program for students and staff. Over the years, Kristin has trained students and staff on practices to improve their overall wellness and currently works with other staff members on the Ruler Committee at SRMS. So we're very fortunate to have them here today to talk to us about applying Ruler in an online environment, which has to be a whole lot more challenging than doing it in brick and mortar. So Tim and Kristin, welcome. Thank you for joining us today, and I will turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Karen and Rosie, for inviting us. It's an honor to be here. We also want to we have great partners at Yale. I think a couple of them are actually watching this, and we couldn't have done the work that we've done without their support.
So Tim sometimes has some technical difficulties with his Chromebook. So he said that if he starts breaking up, that I have to wave at him and then take over. Is he back? There you go.
I'm sorry. I got Wi-Fi extenders and they're still not, I don't know, they're not kicking in. We just felt it was important to share some of the foundational underpinnings of our work. And so these beliefs are commonly shared in our building, and we thought, it would be nice maybe to share it with this group just so you could see this. This slide is shared every year, the first day of school with our staff. It's sort of the tenets that we live by. And the reason why that one is highlighted, start every day over, earning the trust. I've been at Scotts Ridge for 10 years, and the assistant principal I work with, Lisa, and I try to remember not to take anything for granted. And so we like to believe that every day we have to do it all over again. And that's an important part of the process. But, truly, I think the top bullet is what we live by. There's nothing more important than how we treat people, and that permeates every aspect of our building. And I think it also was a great segue into this work. I think setting a culture where people feel valued, connected, and supported helps when you're implementing work like this into a building. So that's just one thing I thought we could share with you. I forget what's next, Kristin. Okay.
PBIS.
We had actually a conversation about this before we started the talk today. So we've been a PBIS school for, gosh, I don't even know how long. It's been a long time, maybe 8 years. And it's worked extremely well in our setting. It gave us the ability to implement advisory. We used the tenets of our STAR program: safety, trustworthy, accountable, and respectful. We have actually what we call Starbucks that we give to students who we see display those behaviors. So when we first were introduced to Ruler, we were sort of confounded by, okay, we have this wonderful PBIS program. Where does Ruler sort of fit in that? And once we sat and we listened and we learned, we realized that the piece that we were missing was actually the ability for students to understand and articulate their emotions. And we thought that, wow, this is really could be a happy marriage, because we have advisory. It's a place where kids can connect to a trusted adult. And now we can weave in the tenets of ruler into that advisory program and strengthen it. And so that's quite honestly the approach. It took us a little while to get there, but that was the approach that we've taken. And I thought it was important to share that, because I think trying to figure out where to start sometimes when you have programs in place can be difficult. We can go to the next one, Chris.
Yeah.
So this is, I'm guessing we didn't know what to include exactly. I'm sure that most people know now what ruler is. You know, and for us, anybody who's gone through the training knows when, even as an adult, you're taking some of those training pieces, you realize how hard it is for yourself to recognize your own emotions. And so you then try to think about, well, if it's hard for me, how difficult must it be for kids? And so I think going through that training helps tremendously, because it gives you a perspective about what it's going to be like and the difficulty it may be initially for students to understand it. And so I'll be honest, it took us, I think, 1.5 years of just adult training before we even thought about implementing ruler with our kids, because there's so much language that we felt we needed to make sure we're in common amongst our staff. We very much took our time with the implementation and really protracted with staff step by step, so that they really understood what ruler was, but before we even thought about how to introduce this to students in a meaningful way. Kristin, feel free to jump in whenever you.
Doing great.
Oh.
Did we lose him? Okay, so one of the things that Tim was going to continue to talk about just was how we ended up embedding ruler at Scotts Ridge. And as he talked about, the staff was really the focus from the beginning of giving us the tools that we needed to effectively be able to use the program really ourselves and then transition that over onto students. So the first phase in for students, however, was the team charter. And actually, even before this, as I said, our staff actually created our own staff charter. So we went through all the processes that we would be then expecting the students to do as well. We, just like we have the mood meter in most of our classrooms, the mood meter is also available at every one of our faculty meetings. We use the app sometimes so that we can just put our emotions right up on the board. But it is a constant reminder that it is something that we value and that we want as a part of our community. Another way that the staff has used ruler is through a wellness hour. So Ridgefield has a professional hour every Thursday before or after school, where we get together and, we're supposed to work on collaborative efforts. And what Scotts Ridge did was turned one of those school-based hours into a wellness choice hour. And so different staff members were able to come up with activities that they could present or facilitate for other staff members. And that was everything from a running club or, going for a walk, to mindful coloring, to cooking, just a potluck where everyone could get together. So it really helped not only build community between us, but again, just keep reinforcing that this was a choice that we took on as a school, and was reinforced in our community. Additionally, when the students are coming into their homerooms in the morning, they are checking in with the mood meter during their morning attendance. As I'll talk about in a little bit, our world language classrooms, that's the first thing that we do every day when the students walk in, is they see the mood meter and they chart themselves on it. And then also our health curriculum, our health teachers have really tried to embed it as much as possible into their curriculum. Something we've added as we've gone through the process is our meta moment room. This room, in the past was used for when students needed a break. And now we've transitioned it over to really encompass the ideals of ruler. So students, when they go to the meta moment room, are there to be able to reflect, are there to be able to identify their emotions, think about their best self, and get themselves prepared to go back to the learning environment. And then finally, we also have the blueprint for conflict resolution, and our guidance department was really great in taking the lead on this one. And we actually came up with a contract, a student contract for conflict. So again, a lot of the activities that we engaged in, our staff was really awesome in building upon the initial materials that Ruler gave us and making it our own for our community. Tim, do you want to add anything?
You did a great job. I don't know if there is much I can add other than, I think for people who are wondering how we transitioned this into the virtual environment, I think it's important to know that the mood meter became the focus for us in this environment because it was the easiest and most translatable in this virtual setting for students to be able to look at the mood meter, plot where they are, and then for us to be able to engage in some discussion about why they were feeling a certain way and what strategies they could use to maybe help. But Kristin, you did a phenomenal job. And so these are just as Kristin indicated, these are, and I don't need to repeat it, she already went through it. These are just the visuals of the tools that we've used at Scotts Ridge. The one thing I'll just add is the blueprint, the way that we use blueprint this year was during, well, up until we were out, was during conflict resolution. We created contracts based on the tenets of the blueprint for students, especially, especially in middle school, those common friendship issues that sometimes occur between kids. We really used the blueprint as a guide to help create some contracts, and it worked extremely well for us. And we're looking forward to continuing to work on that. And I don't need to repeat everything else. The mood meter, I would say, is really the primary tool. It's the one that we used most. It's the most pervasive. It's the one that we're using most.
Yeah, that we're using most commonly online. I would also say that with the blueprint, one of the nice things is, and I'll speak more to it in a couple seconds, but just looking at it, it does lend itself to integrating into curriculum really easily. So in the past where, we would be, any teacher, English, whatever subject area it could be, using some of those touchstones to talk about, well, how do you feel while you're doing this task, or while you're reading about this, or how does the character feel in the story? How might you feel if you were in that character's position? The blueprint allows for a lot of reflection in the general ed areas.
So now I think we're going to transition into how Kristin's currently using it in her classroom, which I think is really neat because, to use this in a world language classroom presents some additional challenges. And I think it would be neat to hear how she and our world language teachers implement it. So looking forward to hearing it, Kristin.
So as Tim has spoken to, in year one, it has been a 3-year transition, and we still have goals that we are looking for year 4 and beyond. But in year one, we really did focus on our own professional development around it and participated in the school's activities for it. Additionally, again, this is our entire world language department, not just me that's doing this. We did start modeling using more emotional vocabulary in the classroom. So speaking to students by saying, I feel, before starting the next, before stating, I feel frustrated right now, or, really being a model for that, for what we were learning in staff professional development in the classroom. In year 2, we continued that staff PD. As Tim said, it was kind of a 1.5-year process for us. But we also included the principles of Ruler, or of that reflection on emotional learning, in our weekly participation rubric. And that was really our first step for taking Ruler and putting it in our classrooms and wanting to make it more of a focus. And then in year 3, as I'll talk to, we actually did decide to make it our student engagement SLO. It's completely centered around Ruler and how we use Ruler in the classroom. We all decided as a group that we would use the mood meter to begin every lesson, and that we would use common vocabulary. We sat down and decided the common vocabulary that we wanted to use, because again, in a world language classroom, we're speaking in the target language 90% or more of the time. So a lot of these activities were also being done in Spanish or French. It wasn't just in English. Additionally, we we're in the process of revamping our curriculum. And during that process, we have worked hard to find places where we can include themes of SEL learning in general and also ruler. And then during this time online, we've definitely been continuing to use ruler in the same ways we were using it in the classroom. And it's been really successful for us. So here's just an example of our weekly participation rubric. And as you can see, we added to the end of it that students would be able to acknowledge their emotions. So that was the first goal for year 2, was even just that acknowledgement piece of it. They may not have the vocabulary yet. And then additionally, we were trying to reinforce using strategies. So those were all teacher-led in the classroom. They were modeled by teachers in the World Language Program and then reinforced with students. Here's the example of our pilot of using it as our SLO. And really this was, again, it was a group effort of, we all felt like ruler was important. We understood the value that it had in our classrooms. So we really wanted to hold ourselves accountable for being able to deliver this to students. So within that, the students are required right now to fill out the mood meter every day before class. And again, use that common vocabulary to talk about not only how they're feeling, but within the curriculum, we've embedded either vocabulary or structures that they need to explain why they feel that way. And this is so this would be from one of our Spanish classrooms. This would be the slide that the students might see at the very beginning of the year. Right now, at the point where we are in class, they just see a regular mood meter because they don't need the words anymore. And these words do change over time. So we start out with some common cognates for them so that they can access them really easily. And then over time, keep adding to that vocabulary bank in their target language. And talking about their energy levels and how that relates to it. And again, like I said, at the beginning in 6th grade, when the students have very little language, they're even just able to say, I feel yellow. And I feel yellow because it's nice weather outside. So there always is that piece, though, where we ask students to be able to explain why they might be feeling that way. And we found that to be very helpful. This is, again, another slide that you might see when you go into the world language classrooms. And again, we have a French program as well, so that would be in French. So I'm just trying to remember. Okay, so but really quickly, just in case people are wondering how the whole transition happened. So at the beginning of this year, when we decided to take it on as our SLO, we did decide, again, like I said, every class the students were going to come in and they were going to see the mood meter, and we were going to dedicate time at the beginning of our lessons during that warm-up time to talk about emotions. And anecdotally, we did really actually see that it was a very useful tool to have at the beginning, and that the time was well spent. So at the beginning, at least personally in my classroom, I definitely was using consistent reinforcement. I think that especially with middle school students, there's always the potential for them to not have that buy-in piece. And the buy-in that I used, at least the avenue that I went down, was constantly telling the kids how it was going to work for them. This was working to their advantage. This was not just because I wanted to know, it was because it would have a direct impact on them. And so the first day of class, that was explained to them in English, obviously, so that everyone was on the same page. And the students knew right away that if they took the time and they really did reflect and tell me where they were on the mood meter, that it would be valued and it would be responded to. And what I mean by that is I explained to the students that in the different quadrants, they would be more successful at different tasks. And that was, again, another thing our department was fascinated by, was like, okay, if I'm in the yellow, then I'm going to be, really engaged with conversation. Or if I'm in green, that's a better time for me to be doing silent reading. If I'm in red, that's a great time for me to be having a debate about something. So we didn't want to place We also wanted to make sure that the quadrants were accessible to the kids from an academic standpoint, so they could be using it again to their advantage. So I do think that's really helpful with students to make it about them. They like things that are about them. And so, you know, really explaining out how it would help them reach their personal goals or their academic goals was very useful in getting them to be engaged. So again, at the beginning, over the first couple of weeks, if my class came in and a lot of them were at the yellow, I explained to them, I see that you have a lot of energy today. I see that you're in a great mood, and therefore I'm going to pick an appropriate task for us to do in class. I see that you're in green today, so we're going to, instead of doing the task maybe, you know, where I was going to have you guys do a Socratic seminar, I was going to have you, you know, do a lot of moving around. Why don't we transition that into an activity where, you know, you can just sit and you can be relaxed and it will match your energy levels. So I think the students started to see that I was responding to where they were putting themselves on the mood meter. Again, if they had a lot of energy, I was like, okay, you have a lot of energy today. I guess we have to play a game at some point. And they really did start to, that buy-in came as a result of that. Also, the students do really appreciate understanding how their mindset affects their tasks. So again, before an assessment, we would do the mood meter and say specifically, okay, you know, we have this assessment coming up right now. How do you feel? And allowing the students to have that outlet of that ability to reflect on, I'm nervous, or I feel really confident right now, and being able to share that with their peers. As time went on, we did actually transition it off of being teacher modeled, where, you know, the students would come in and then I would ask them specifically, how do you feel today and why? And they would respond to me, whereas the students were doing their warm-ups in world language, which is usually speaking, by interviewing each other. So we would always have a question of the day. What are you doing this weekend? How was your weekend? What did you do? But part of that is they always had to ask, how are you feeling and why? So the students were also one-on-one with each other, sharing that experience. So again, talking a little bit about how the students responded to it. I had a kid consistently at the beginning of the year, and you do have to stay on top of them because they can go, you know, a little funky with the mood meter, who consistently was putting himself in blue. And I, you know, would remind them, I'd say, you know, chicos, remember, like, this is going to help me help you. So the more honest you can be with this, the better class is going to go today. You know, I can respond to it, or, you know, the more I can respond to you. And he kept putting himself in blue. So finally I said to him, you know, can you tell me, why do you feel like you're always in blue? And this is where, as a teacher, it's very helpful, because the student was able to say, well, it's not necessarily school related. And again, this is where my 10% in English is sometimes helpful, but that I get in class every day. But he said, you know, my dog's been sick and my parents think that we're going to have to put her down. So again, you know, here I was thinking, and I take responsibility for that, thinking that, you know, the kid was kind of pulling my leg. Everyone else, it's the first 2 weeks of school, 3 weeks of school. They're all in yellow. They're all happy to be there. Happy to see each other again. And I would have never known that this was going on with this student otherwise. Now, he didn't consistently stay in blue. I explained to him, okay, well, right now you're thinking about that. So I appreciate you putting yourself in the appropriate position, but, you know, just remember, we don't always feel that way forever. And certainly enough, he would go to the different quadrants depending on what day it was. He had a math quiz, he'd be in red, you know, and he'd move along. And some of the ways that transitioned into online is in our daily classes, he was consistently over the last couple of weeks giving me yellow, yellow, yellow. And then all of a sudden I got blue one day and I feel sad, was how he explained it. And I said, okay, well, why do you feel sad? And he said, because tomorrow's the day we have to put my dog down. So it's, you know, it really helps you create that connection with kids, and they do end up sharing a lot more with you. And even as teachers, it's been really helpful. We have common planning time every day where we get together, and the French teacher on one occasion came down and she was like, was anyone else's kids in red today during period 2? And I was like, yeah, mine were in red that today too. She's like, all right, well, did you figure out what had happened? And I'm like, oh, I think something, you know, they had a discussion in social studies class, and it didn't, you know, it kind of left everybody on edge at the end of it because the topic didn't really get to be teased out. But again, my students weren't ready to learn at that point at the beginning of class because they were still thinking about the class that happened before. And then additionally, I was able to go down to the 8th grade social studies teacher and be like, hey, just a heads up, you know, the kids really enjoyed the conversation yesterday, but they don't feel like it's done. They still feel like they have a lot more that they want to say. So he was able to use that feedback as well to change his lesson for the next day to give a little bit more time for students to tease out what they had been talking about. Again, like I had said before, you know, ruler in the online setting or even just in the classroom, we found different ways to consistently bring it back to our curriculum. And you know, if we're reading a book, how do you think the character felt? Right now on our projects, there's always a space for feelings. So it doesn't matter what the topic is that we're learning or the theme. The students be what we're feeling or how something related to that topic was feeling or a character was feeling. And then finally, using ruler to measure tasks. You know, it was very easy to, in class, have the kids do something and then at the end of the task tell me where you are on the mood meter. And not only did I get to reflect a lot of my teaching some days, but the kids were also able to say like, yeah, I was in a great mood until I had to do that. Or, you know, I was feeling kind of tired today and then you made us move around and, you know, we got to do this certain task and, you know, I feel a lot better now. I feel like my energy's been lifted. So it's definitely been a really useful tool. And certainly I can see just from the success that we've had in world language, how it could be used across other disciplines as well. So that's kind of all.
Kristin, would you mind, we had a request for you to go back to the weekly participation rubric. Would you mind just putting that back up on the screen for a minute?
Yeah, of course. So a lot of this goes, I mean, our weekly participation rubric brought in PBIS for sure, in terms of, you know, being respectful, being trustworthy, you know, cleaning up after ourselves and our environment. So originally it was created based upon our PBIS program. And then, like I said, once ruler was introduced to the staff, we really wanted to start facilitating the students' reflection on their own emotions on a daily basis. This was actually weekly, but yeah.
We did have a couple other questions, if you don't mind, Kristin.
Sure.
People are interested in knowing what was the direct positive impact on kids as a result of these efforts.
So I definitely would say the classroom environment certainly shifted as a result of all of this. It's not, there's nothing strange about us talking about emotions. It's, you know, it's a very easy process for students to talk about. I think that they feel more comfortable sharing with each other and with me when something is bothering them or when something great happens, because it's such a big part of our routine. They come in every day really in a mindset of, I can share with my peers and I can share with my teachers, and this is a safe place. Additionally, like I said, the most fascinating part for us as a group was really how it can help kids be successful in general. So recognizing emotions and being able to use them to their benefit in the classroom or beyond. And kids really did respond to that of saying, well, you know, even though I feel this way today, I can either move myself out of that quadrant so that I can complete this task, or can I have another task that's better fitting of my mood today? An example of that is I have a student who is classified as ED. And again, he's in all the quadrants. He participates every day, but he's seen that direct response from me of, you know, when he puts himself in blue, I check in with him and I'm like, all right, bud, if he's in blue and green, I said, is today a day you just want, you know, I'm gonna, you know, ask you a question, of course, how are you feeling today? And you need to tell me how you're feeling and why. But then I'm gonna respect the fact that that's how you're feeling today. And I'm not gonna prompt you a lot. I'm gonna, you know, you need to participate still, but I'm gonna respect where you are, and I'll use another student, you know, to call on or things like that. Again, the students, I mean, we've gone as far as putting mood meters on assessments for them so they can chart themselves at the beginning and at the end. And it's that constant reminder that my emotions do affect me, but they don't have to be me. You know, my emotions are a piece of me, and I can reflect on them and I can use them to my advantage, or in just acknowledging them, that sometimes that makes something go a lot easier for me, if that makes any sense.
Kristen, there was another question on if you go back to your mood meter where you have it in Spanish. People wanted to know what does that say in English?
So the mood meter is obviously split into the 4 quadrants. So the yellow over here is usually when you have high energy and also a high positive feelings. So in yellow we have happy, content, or happy, it's a same word, euphoric, and excited. And then we have down in green, green is when you have lower energy, but you're still in a good mood, you're still in a positive place. So we have tranquilo would be like calm, relajado is relaxed, and paz is like at peace and satisfied. So you're kind of chilling in that realm over there. Over in blue is when you're low energy and your level of positivity, or you're in the lower area. So we have sad, tired, depressed, and nostalgic. And again, we tried to, when we originally putting these words out there, to pick ones that were cognate, so the kids could access them really easier. So they were similar in Spanish, same in French to English. And then up in red is when you have high energy, but you're also, the level of positivity is not there. So we have furious, frustrated, mad, and in a bad mood.
Great, thank you. And for people who are wondering about getting copies of the slides, we will be able to post those slides so that people can go back and look at those. Another person wanted to know about resources that you may use for Ruler, especially for the high school, if they wanted to get started with the high school program.
Yeah, we, you know, obviously we're focused on the middle school, but obviously if you reach out to Yale directly, they have plenty of resources.
So I think Tim cut out there. I did put in the chat the rulerapproach.org, which is the website for Ruler. So folks can go there to get a lot more information about the program. Ruler is pre-K through 12. So there are resources. I wanted to ask Kristen and Tim if other schools in your district have integrated Ruler into their program, so that students, as they go from level to level, have a continuous experience with that and are familiar with that. And then another question from the group was to talk a little bit more about what you did with staff during that, you know, orientation, kind of to get them comfortable enough so that this would be successful with students.
Yeah, those are great questions. I think, you know, now in our district, it started with the middle school. So the middle schools were the first foray into Ruler. And then and now it's a K-8 program. So at least there is that continuity and alignment from elementary to middle school. So right now for us, it is a K-8 program. And as far as the training, we very much, it was very incremental, and we were pretty creative. Like, for instance, I'll just give you an example. One of the activities you do when you go through the Ruler training is you have to read facial expressions and try to figure out what those facial expressions mean. Frustrated, angry. Well, we taped staff members in many of those faces, including me, as one activity to keep. I think you rely on a lot of creativity. But I go back to what I said at the beginning. I do think that you really have to have a strong culture in the building whenever you're moving one of these giant initiatives into it. So I think those two things have to sort of go hand in hand. But we have created many of our own resources based on the training that we received to help our faculty weave their way into it.
One of the questions right now is, are you using the mood meter throughout the day and in other subject areas?
So yes, it's not. So it is, especially with our counselors. Our counselors are using it in their regular sessions with their students. So it is an opportunity at the beginning for students to check in where they are on the mood meter. It's really the only piece that we're able to use right now, but it is consistent. Many of our staff are using that currently.
Another question just came through, but it's one that is on my mind too, and it has to do with what's the most difficult challenges that you faced implementing the user ruler and using ruler with Fidelity during remote learning and being socially and physically at a distance. So how did you use ruler at a distance remotely, and what were the challenges that you faced and or successes?
I don't know that anything in this environment can be done with Fidelity. I think that, I'm having a lot of questions just in terms of even the content that we're teaching, if it's being done with Fidelity. I think we're all in that boat. So we haven't, if you're asking me, we survey a lot in our school. We survey parents, we survey kids, we survey staff. We've not done that to be able to ascertain to what degree this has been successful. We just haven't done it yet. So that's a hard question for us to answer in the moment.
At least in our classrooms, like I said, it was already a part of our daily routine, so we continued that online. We don't, in the world language department, we don't teach our classes every day because we teach 3 levels, so our schedule doesn't allow for that. So on the days that we're not checking in with students live on a virtual lesson, they'll either have to do a Flipgrid or a Google form, and they have to still use the mood meter to check in with us every day. And then additionally, during the live lessons, that's one of the first slides that's up. So when they join our virtual lessons, they see the mood meter and they immediately check in with us, whether it's via the chat or being able to speak to it. And again, it's in the target language for them. They're always encouraged that if there's something that they can't express, that they are allowed to switch into English, because we don't want to hinder that process. But the students are given the opportunity to always reflect every single day in our classes online.
Great. So I have another question. I think this is foremost on most administrators' minds, at least in the couple of Zoom meetings that I was in over the last couple of days, and that is, how do we help all the students during this unrest across the country after events during the past week that were exacerbated by the death of George Floyd, but really over decades of racial injustice? So how can we use ruler strategies and tools to help everyone feel, take action, and hopefully to heal?
That's a very profound question. I think that it should be permeating all of our discussions currently. I think first and foremost, you have to validate student emotions. There's going to be a wide range of emotions, and we have to be able to validate those. But I think this goes beyond ruler. I think that holistically, we need to do more in terms of teaching our students topics like inherent bias and stereotyping and racism and prejudice. These are topics that are taught, I think, in part and parcel, but are not holistic, and there's not a holistic approach. And I think that we need that. I think we need that now more than ever. We need to engage in dialogue, and it can be uncomfortable, but we have to be ready to engage in uncomfortable conversations.
Which kind of gets into another one of my questions, and that's, how did you integrate like PBIS, restorative practices, all the things that you were doing before you began with the ruler program? How did you integrate those, and what pieces did you keep? What pieces did you let go?
So we never were a restorative practice school. That was not, I think, I'm not knocking restorative practice in any way. We just didn't feel as though the alignment.
So our school community, okay, he's back. Sorry, go ahead, Tim.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You cut out.
I know, I hate this Wi-Fi. So I'm not sure where I cut out, but we implemented PBIS a long time ago, and I think part of our process for that was just working with staff to identify needs, and it rose to the surface that we needed other ways to connect to kids. And it just made sense with PBIS and advisory being the conduit to that, that would be a program that would be beneficial for us. So that's how we got started. It was just very simply filling a need, but then implementing it with fidelity. I think it's important that once you step into a process like Ruler or like PBIS, you have to commit and you have to be consistent, because if you're not, it can easily fall apart.
And it really does serve to be a community builder. It's not a topic that necessarily is always discussed at home with kids, or they're not usually given this opportunity in a lot of settings to be able to share something that's personal. So if you are using it consistently, if you're consistently reinforcing it positively to students and showing them the benefits of it, it creates a really strong community around you. And in that case, as Tim was saying, it allows you to have some really tough discussions. It allows you to explore, if a kid's feeling a certain way, we're all in this together of understanding why that is, because none of us are immune to these emotions. And somebody might be able to explain it better than I can, or, somebody might be able to relate an experience back to an emotion, that I've had, but I couldn't access at the time. It really does serve to be a great foundation for just building a community up and making it feel really strong and really personal.
Well, I think you've kind of said it too, where you're looking at the students' feelings, you're finding out where they're coming from, and then you're able to move them forward and to help them based on where you see them landing on the mood meter.
Yeah.
A question came in a while back, which is sort of relevant to the direction you've been moving in. And somebody asked, what would you do with information, like maybe some troubling information that students might have presented on the mood meter? Like, would you notify guidance if a student was identifying as upset or angry or frustrated?
For sure. If a student comes in as consistently in the same place, not only am I going to take them aside and not use the whole class discussion time to talk to them about, consistently you're plotting yourself here. Tell me a little bit more about that. And there have been cases where kids have come back with some really either enlightening information that helps everyone on the team understand more about the child, or is something that as a classroom teacher I need support with. And again, because our school is so supportive of this and we all have this buy-in, it's a valid piece of data that I can take down to the office and either pop in and see Tim or see any of our counselors and say, hey, consistently I'm seeing this data point come back, or here they've plotted themselves on it, because there's online ways for them to plot as well. And I think that we really need to check in with this student, or reach out to the parents and have a bigger discussion about this. So in terms of that, like I said, it's an incredibly valuable piece of getting to know your student and being able to meet them where they are and ensure their success.
Have you done any sharing with parents about these strategies and just?
Absolutely.
Oh,
yes. We've invited parents in for multiple, because the mood meter in of itself can be used at home, and we've articulated that to them. We have many parents that do. So we've done many presentations for our PTA, and always, for us, I think it's important, like Kristin today, we let our teachers really lead that process so that parents can make those tangible connections from the classroom home, and that's important.
I'm not sure. I know you do have a couple people on here from Yale. I'm not sure if one of them would like to talk a little bit about the training at Yale and opportunities and resources that they might have. Julie, I think you were on.
Julie, and I think Alyssa too. I think they're both here.
Yeah, Julie and Elisa are both here. This is Julie. Hi, everybody. We thank you, Scotch team, for sharing. I think it's really wonderful the ways that you found it to be possible to kind of fold in Ruler into all the different things that you're doing and throughout your different curricular spaces. It's really wonderful. So thank you for sharing that. But yeah, Elisa and I are both here, and I think we're happy to answer questions from anyone about sort of the nuts and bolts and logistics, or how any of this works.
And it's Lisa, and I'll just add as well, on the Ruler Approach website, there is more information on just applying for training, how training works, how family engagement works, my role is with schools, and with supporting families to bring the skills home. There's also resources and articles that are publicly available, so you can find out more by visiting that Ruler Approach site. But yes, of course, we'll take questions as well.
There was a question in the chat about in the rollout process with staff, whether you encountered any resistance or pushback. And again, if you can give another example of an activity you did with staff to kind of build their capacity and familiarity with the program.
Anything with humor, anything with food and humor will pull staff in. No, I think you're always, there's always that 5%. It quite frankly might be a little bit less in our building, and we're fortunate for that. But you always have a couple of people that you may need to sit with and help talk them through so that they understand, because from a teacher's perspective, it's just one more thing, right? And so I think sometimes it's creating an environment where teachers can come in and sit down and you can talk with them one-on-one so that they better understand and you can deepen their connection to it. And then once they see the effectiveness of it, that's when you can, hopefully you pull as many more along as you can. But most of the activities that we did with our staff really did, we always brought food, and coffee, which always helps. And we always tried to implement activities that created opportunities for people to laugh and really be candid about how they felt about their own emotions. And so, I think it's too bad that Lisa Fries isn't here because
he went out again.
Looks like we lost him again. I'm not quite sure where he was going.
Well,
sorry.
That's okay. Keep going, Tim.
Tim.
I apologize. I don't know when I'm going out. I need a professional to come in here and figure out this Wi-Fi. I don't know but we do have activities that we've used that I'm sure Lisa wouldn't mind sharing.
Yeah, I think too, there was some work that I had done before we even had Ruler, where we were in that PBS realm, and I was really interested in mindfulness, and from my own, personal practice of doing different mindfulness activities, and started doing Mindful Mondays with students and staff, where again, it was, not necessarily ruler based, and this was 5 years ago or more now, where we would do daily yoga and meditation on Mondays for both groups. And even in that, you started to see people who were coming out and trying something new. One of the things about our building is that it's a very safe place for staff to try new things. And therefore, nothing ever feels like it's going to be that challenging for us, because we're always positively reinforced for trying something new, even if it doesn't work. And there were definitely pockets of staff who really, through PBIS, through the mindfulness training that we did, and their own interest in it, really took the ball and ran, and were able to support their teammates because of that. We are in a team model, so it was nice that even if there was a staff member that probably wasn't as comfortable with this whole realm of Ruler, that we had other people around them to support it. And coming up with the team charters and the staff charter, all supported us feeling like it was a group effort, and that nobody was going to be by themselves having to talk to kids one-on-one about emotions. And we were allowed to make it our own, and to also use it to the degree that we felt comfortable with.
We embrace, I was just going to say, we embrace failure. We think it's important. If we want our teachers to be healthy risk takers, then you have to be cognizant of the fact that sometimes you're going to fail, and you have to be supportive of that. That's just, I don't know if everybody believes that, but that's how we operate.
That's great for giving people the opportunity to take risks. One of the questions that came through, wanted to know if there's some things that you can implement quicker than others, so that they can get started, because we know that we've got a lot of trauma, a lot of kids with high mental health issues and challenges coming in next year when we go back to school. Is there something that people could do to get started, even though, because it sounds like it takes 3 years for training?
Well, I think even starting from day one, like when we decided to take on putting it in as our SLO this year, we knew that it was the first day of school. It was establishing that routine that was going to make it successful for us. So as Tim talked about, the mood meter is really the most accessible piece of this, because it can be in front of you every day, and you can build the community around that. So even if the students just have a general understanding of, what the different quadrants represent, and how to use the mood meter effectively by plotting themselves on it and getting positively reinforced for that, I think that starts creating an environment of connections. And then from there, you know, as the teacher is learning more about the process, you know, everybody can be learning together. But really, the mood meter does make it very accessible for students and staff to jump right in at the beginning of the year and create community. Tim, what do you think?
Oh, I 100% agree. I think that, you know, the accessibility for students, especially to support staff in this current situation that we're in, you know, is going to be vital. And I do believe if you're already into year one, that the mood meter can be a huge benefit to helping students acclimate back. All right, am I live? All right, that's
You're live.
Oh, somebody asked about the meta moment room.
Yeah.
Is that a question? Can you talk? So we used to have a room we called the timeout room. And it was basically when a student would be sent out of class, they'd be sent into the office, and you know, it's close to where the administrative office is. And it was very much when you call something timeout, it feels.
Yeah, it felt punitive to the student. There was still a reflection piece where students had to, you know, sit down and talk about, you know, why they were sent there and how, because, and what they could do different next time. But I had done some training with the Holistic Life Foundation, which is out of Baltimore, Maryland, and they were using a mindfulness room at the time. And, you know, giving the students the opportunity to sit and reflect and to regulate really was their point behind it. So when we started using Ruler, another two colleagues and I, you know, sat down and thought about, well, how does that fit into Ruler, that idea of having it not be punitive, but not necessarily always being able to have a staff member there like these schools in Baltimore have that facilitate, you know, mindful reflection and then regulation of emotions through different strategy. So the Meta Moment Room came from that, of being able to directly take the Ruler materials that we were provided with, and I'll go back to the slide that has the you know, what a meta moment is, of being able to reflect, being able to ask, what is my best self in this situation? And how do I get myself out of whatever quadrant I'm in if I choose to do so? So it was really just redirecting the intent behind it and being able to facilitate that with students. So there is still a reflection piece on it, and it is a piece of paper that the students then use.
One of the questions, Kristen, coming in is who staffs the room and how is it scheduled?
So even in the past, when we had the timeout room, it was incorporated as part of our duty schedule. So this would be like if you had lunch duty or anything like that, it was a period where students would be in there, or staff would be in there and available for that. In more recent years, it's been a little bit more fluid, and our front main office staff has definitely been very supportive of that. I can say that I think the instances of students being sent to the Meta Moment Room has greatly decreased over time, because again, we have a safe space where students can say exactly how they're feeling. So, you know, when you talk about outcomes, you know, behaviors can be managed much more effectively when a student feels comfortable being able to say, I'm frustrated, rather than displaying a behavior that wouldn't be conducive in the academic environment. So it's kind of a group effort, you know, with our main office staff and with teachers, but then also Ruler itself really supports, yes, meta moments are going to happen and we're going to need them, but the staff are also given the tools with meta moment training to be able to facilitate that right in the classroom. So.
And there's always an administrator that checks in. So one of us always goes into that room when a student is sent there to help them process. Yeah. That's important. It's important for us to be able to check in and find out, you know, what occurred in the classroom, and then help them think through it. It's usually not major issues that lead to somebody going to the meta moment room. You know, it's usually.
I think it's what Tim was going to say, was it's usually for more of those typical disruptive behaviors where a student's really struggling to stay in the academic environment. There is a mood meter in the Meta Moment room. Actually, all of the Ruler resources are available in the Meta Moment room for the students to see. They have to fill out a mood meter when they go there. And yes, they do also have to reflect on why that they feel that way, how they can move themselves from one quadrant to the other, and see their best self in the situation. And then upon leaving, they fill out the mood meter again. There is the sheet that we have for that encompasses all of it.
I just want to thank you guys. We could go on and on with this conversation, and it's been great having you here. So much to think about. I, for one, would love to come and visit your school to see, when we're back in school, and just see everything in practice, because it sounds awesome. And I thank you so much for coming and sharing it with us. For those of you that would like to know more about how to get started, or to continue this conversation, we have something very special coming up here at CAS, and that is that we will be starting a Leaders Are Readers book club, and we will be doing that, kicking it off in the next couple weeks, so stay tuned. But the first book that we will be reading and discussing over the summer just happens to be Mark Brackett's book, Permission to Feel. So we will be having conversations during the summer, different activities, different things that we can get together and talk about that particular book. We do have a podcast that will be coming out that we did earlier this year with Mark Brackett, and so that will be released during our book study time, and who knows what else, but surprises. So we hope that you'll join us by reading that book and having conversations and keep this conversation going. Also, just a reminder that we do have one more week of CAS Zoom-ins for this particular year at CAS. Next Tuesday, we have a very special session that we're going to do, which will be more of a roundtable conversation about what do we say, what must we do, because during these times of racial and social injustice, we know that leaders have to help build the community and have to address difficult topics around unconscious bias, blatant inequalities, and racial disparities. So what can we do? What can we say? We hope that you'll come and join us so that we can put our heads together and figure out how we can build culturally responsive school communities. So that'll be next Tuesday, 11:30 to 12:30. And on Thursday, we have another special session on birth to grade 3, especially right now as we're thinking about reopening schools, summer camps, programs. What is it that we need to consider and know, even including special ed for one of our most neediest populations, the younger kids, and most important. So we've got a great panel to talk about that. And on June 18th, we have a very special webinar with a person named Professor Evan Mandry, who's a professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, who's written a great political article entitled, "We're About to Have the Longest Summer Vacation Ever. That's going to be a problem," and he's going to be here to talk about it. You can go out to the CAS website and learn a little bit more about Professor Mandry, and also get a connection to his article in Political, which came out last month. So hope you'll join us for those next 3 very exciting things. I know everybody's busy. We will be recording those if you do miss us, but hopefully you'll be able to join us. Once again, I'd like to give a special thanks and shout out to Tim and Kristin for being here today to share how they've implemented Ruler at Scotts Ridge Middle School.
Yeah, I apologize for the Wi-Fi issues, everybody, but feel free to reach out if you have any questions. We're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Yes, for sure. Thank you, everyone.